bell. There it is. Ring the bell, dude. There it is. Ring that bell. Ding, 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 ding. New York Stock Exchange, corner Broad and Wall. It's closed. Closing time for them. Opening time for us here. Doing the news and doing politics. Looks like Dow Jones about flat, up a little bit touch. All day NASDAQ was lower. Made a rally about midday and ended up in the green, S&P in the green. Also, just want to tell you very quickly, crypto has been backing off 104,500 right now. So a Bitcoin per Bitcoin came back down a little bit. And as we see the gold, $3,379 to the ounce. Whew. Big gold. Gold's always good. Yesterday in Boulder, Colorado, we saw this, right? A peaceful group of Jewish people called Run for Their Lives was assembled to raise awareness for the Israeli hostages in Gaza when Mohammed Sabri Solomon threw a Molotov cocktail, several lit a torch, burned people in the group while yelling "Free Palestine." 8 people were burned. Let's bring in our next guest here to discuss what the FBI is calling a terrorist act. Is co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Good friend of mine, I will say this, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Doc, really good to be doing TV with you again, just so the folks understand. We did a bunch of stuff, I guess around, remember the Arab Spring 2010, 2011, when there was a lot of emotion, a lot of Arab emotion going on, a lot of bad things were happening around the world. Doc, you were really spot on then. I think, just give us a sense of what you think is happening, specifically like this incident, right? The guy takes a blowtorch, he also takes Molotov cocktails, and he burns people, some severely burned people. Any relationship, I mean, I will say, I would connect the dots to all the pro-Palestinian protesting that's going on in New York City and around the country. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, Eric, and it's great to be with you again. And, this is the culmination of decades of radicalization. And what I think people don't understand or are missing is that during COVID, from the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the radicalization of the Democratic Party, we've seen now in America and in the West this red-green axis, which is the red being the Chinas and Venezuelas and Russias of the world, along with the Islamists being the green, being the Irans, Hamas's, Muslim Brotherhood. This is a radicalized individual who is an Egyptian citizen, an illegal American here, overstayed his visa. And it's not a surprise that the war in Gaza, which is a just war against the Hamas, against the terrorists, and ultimately Free Palestine has become the new Allahu Akbar. It's become the new national identity for whoever it might be. Most people that are radicalized don't even know where Palestine is on a map, and yet they do it because they hate America, they hate the West. They've absorbed that narrative that everything is the West's fault, everything is America's fault, and we see it not only among radical Islamists, like we saw with the Colorado attack, but a few weeks ago against the 2 Israeli couple that was murdered on the streets of D.C. by a, I think his name is Rodriguez. I mean, this is how you can see the red-green axis, where it could be either part of that axis that hates America and hates the West that's going to attack us. And we saw the normalization of violence in the BLM movement and now we're starting to see some of that come together in this so-called Free Palestine movement.
It's amazing, Doc, that here we are, 15 years since, we were talking back then. Remember, the Council for American Islamic Relations was all over which, by the way, they were indicted as a co-conspirator, unindicted co-conspirator of 9/11. But nonetheless, they were here to allegedly bring relations between Americans and Islam together. And we're 15 years later, we seem like we're no closer, maybe even further apart.
Yeah, we've not treated the disease. I'm a doctor. I don't just treat symptoms, I treat disease. And our American Islamic Forum was about separating mosque and state. And these Islamist movements were funded initially by the Saudis, but ultimately by the Islamist movements. Qatar especially now has become a massive funder in universities and elsewhere. So there's this nexus. It's not a coincidence that these crazy demonstrations that are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and Congress had hearings about, were basically exposing that our universities were being funded not just by the Chinas of the world, but by Qatar, where you saw Al Jazeera fueling anti-American, anti-Western hate and radicalizing our youth on our campuses here in America. And the FBI turned a blind eye. Homeland Security turned a blind eye during the Biden administration and during the Obama administration before it. And now the Trump administration is playing catch up as we have ignored radicals in exchange for focuses on climate change, on people who were not taking mandated vaccines, all this other nonsense that on January 6th, all these fake crises were being paid attention to. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, where did these radicals come from? Well, we've allowed radicals to represent Muslims. We've allowed radicals to be, fostered in our universities, and now it's basically coming to roost.
Doc, clearly hate crime, clearly terrorism, and the FBI is investigating both as such. I don't think we're going to disagree on that. But take a look. Ann Coulter had something, control. If you get the Ann Coulter graphics about how New York Times framed this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, Doc, is because part of the reason why some of these things I believe are happening is, yes, the nonsense, the moronic students that don't know what they're even protesting for or what they're representing or who. By the way, if you told them, if you're gay in any of these places of Islamic worship, you will likely be killed or certainly imprisoned. And yet they'll defend these same people. Also, the media. Take a look at this. In the New York Times, suspect in Boulder attack was in U.S., quote, illegally. Homeland Security Department says. Why would they put quotes around the word illegally? He was here. He was illegal. We wouldn't even know. He overstayed a visa. He broke the law. Doc, the media is perpetrating some of this violence, I would say, or at least assisting in it.
And because to the far left, they don't see our Constitution as our body of laws as only applying to citizens. They think it applies to the whole planet, that somehow foreign agents, foreign students somehow have the same rights to criticize our government, to criticize and demonstrate and actually espouse hate, which thankful to Secretary Rubio, we are beginning to ship out a lot of these students. Thankful to the Trump administration, we're beginning to say, hold on a second, we can't fuel our own demise. Yes, our citizens have rights to free speech, and yes, they might be able to say things that we find objectionable, but not folks here on visa, not folks that are here supposedly as guests, because that ultimately gives rights to the entire Chinese population, the entire Qatari, Iranian population that are all part of movements that want to destroy us. So they put quotes around the illegal because to them, it's American identity is the problem. They don't believe in an American constitutional contract for our citizens alone. They think it applies to everyone. And ultimately, these globalists want to see our foundations destroyed.
Doc, I got a minute. This is going to create a lot of controversy, so don't answer if you don't want to. Barack Hussein Obama. Hussein is clearly a Muslim name, right? Explain to me why he can say Barack Hussein Obama and not weigh in on some of this massive violence that's going on. First, the blowtorch and Molotov cocktail in Denver a couple of weeks ago, a couple of innocent Israelis walking out of a theater getting killed, mowed down. Why wouldn't Obama, former president, weigh in on some of this?
It's because, I'll take his faith for what he reports to be Christian, but at the end of the day, the hate America, the blame America sort of liberation theology is what he came from, and that's anti-American. It's about a movement that ultimately fostered Nation of Islam, fostered radicalism, anti-Americanism. So to them, it's about identity politics. It's not about national identity. It's about racial identity. And they want to racialize Islam, which is an ideology. And I've argued for so long, as you know, that we need to reform against the medieval interpretations that dominate who we are as Muslims and infuse all of this radicalization and the death cult that is Hamas, that now the left and the Islamists have embraced and have fueled these types of acts of terror.
Doc, really good to get you back in the mix, and we're going to be talking to you a lot more as we go forward. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, one of the foremost experts on all these things. Doc, good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you, Eric. Anytime.
All right, folks. I had the opportunity to join ICE. Now, this was fantastic. I rode along with ICE in Orlando late part of last week, and we finally got the opening, the real estate, to show you a little bit taste of what went on. Watch. Early morning hours, just days ago, we were granted rare access to a major bust of some real bad hombres, Tren de la Agua gangbangers.
All right, folks, we're going out on two Tren de la Agua members, one to murder. So they're going to deport both of these people. Law enforcement is here, present. This is what we voted for. This is what we paid for. This is what we wanted. And look at this, 22 different officers, 7 different law enforcement agencies. This is legit. We're vested up. This could get crazy. Who knows?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, was the lead, but there were 7 agencies present, including the FBI, the DEA, HSI, federal marshals, and Florida Highway Patrol, among others. We blurred the faces to protect the identities of the officers. Tren de la Agua is known to use highly sophisticated facial recognition technology to identify our officers and rain down terror on them and their families. In the following video compilation, you will see these thugs get arrested and hauled off to ICE detention centers and then on their way to deportation. These raids are highly planned, highly successful, very dangerous.
We're sitting here, we're waiting. We got to the location, the pre-dawn location. 22 law enforcement officers from 7 or 8 different agencies are involved. A couple of bad guys, 2 separate raids, busts, removals, I guess we'll call it. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so thank you. So these are targeted enforcement actions. So this particular individual that we are looking to target is a suspected TDA member. He has involvement in aggravated assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. He also has aggravated battery, bodily harm charges. Right now, we're just setting up. We're at the location where the target may be. Our team leads on this. They're situated where hopefully this target will, they've done their homework. So the agents, the officers have done their homework. So they've been tracking his patterns.
These raids are highly planned, highly successful, very dangerous, and ultimately make our streets safer for law-abiding citizens. This day, 2 TDA gangbangers would be busted. In addition to being illegal aliens, they're wanted for assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill, murder, and money laundering.
We have a lot more of that over the next coming days and weeks. We'll show you more of that as we get to it. All right, folks, we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Ooh, this is a live shot. Ben, voice of God, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Is that a live shot?
This is a live shot of Russia, Moscow,
Wow.
Russia.
Wow. So something bad happens, we might get a live shot. That's crazy. That's a great shot, Ben. All righty, folks. Peace talks were supposed to continue today between Russia and Ukraine. Well, the weekend had a little distraction of that. The delegations met in Turkey for the second round of the talks, but the discussion only lasted a little more than an hour with no progress to ending the 3-year war. This after Ukraine launched that long-range attack on Russia over the weekend. Well, here to discuss is former senior advisor of the House Permanent Select Intelligence Committee and former National Security Council staffer in President Trump's first administration, Colonel Derek Harvey. Colonel, really good to have you, my friend. So what blows me, what was really fascinating to me is how in the world was Russia so exposed to allow granted, a lot of drones, I believe several hundred drones, how were they so vulnerable to allow that much assets to be destroyed by drones?
Well, it took the Ukrainians almost a year and a half, detailed planning, very patiently. They worked a tremendous plan of operation, diverse, hitting multiple locations, some thousands of miles away from Ukraine. And their OPSEC was tremendous. Now, I compare this, maybe look what the Israelis did with the pager bombs, okay? There's always adaptation, whether it's low-tech adaptation like box cutters using airplanes as bombs, to what we're seeing now in the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East with the use of drones, whether it's the Houthis or the Iranians or others. And just think about this domestically. We've got a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of enemies. We have strategic assets like the Russians did, and we've got large Super Bowl games that could be attacked by, an Islamist group, an Iranian group, a narco-terrorist group, or another state actor.
Do we know who supplied those drones? Who made those drones?
I do not have that information yet, and what the source of them was probably, again, most of those are coming from Asia. Purchased
with possibly U.S. funds? Here's what I'm getting at. At some point, Putin, he's so erratic. Let's do it this way. What do you think Putin's response, his real response, is going to be? Well, there is the risk of escalation, and it could be limited into the geographic theater in Ukraine or around Ukraine. It could be, something that's not proportionate in another area of the world if they think the United States was involved, or the UK or some other entity. But there probably will be a reaction. And, the first thing was the, Russian delegation only met for an hour in a very perfunctory engagement. There are other risks, not just the peace talks, but, we don't know what the response will be, and Putin is not one to take things lying down. Well, he made a statement. He said, we're going to investigate this. He said, Ukraine will be held responsible, and he said, and further than Ukraine. So he's almost insinuating that if they find out that there's some assistance by the U.S. or some European country specifically, he may go ahead and expand his theater a bit too. And won't that, by definition, start World War III? That is a concern about risk of escalation, and it doesn't necessarily lead to World War III, but it could lead to an expansion of the war. It might not continue. It could be just a limited operation someplace else. There's a lot of options on the range of opportunities that the Russians could have here. But at the end of the day, we have to worry about how things might be exploited here in the United States from a force protection perspective. And then also, these planes were so easily attacked because they were complying with the strategic nuclear arms agreements, which allow us to be able to observe them and understand their status. And so they were vulnerable because of past agreements. And, that could have an implication on how those agreements are going to be addressed going forward. And the Russians have already asked for a revisit of strategic nuclear talks, some sort of consultative meeting. So they play by the rules. They play by the rules, and they lose. Estimates are as high as $7 billion worth of assets, with $1 million worth of drone firepower coming from Ukraine. I can see why Putin's pissed off, very, very angry. Is this the exact case for never allowing Ukraine into NATO? Well, it doesn't appear that they took any consideration, President Zelensky or others, for the possible implications on the NATO allies or the United States. And this is, a very provocative act. Yes, it had big news, big impact, but, there was really no consideration that I've been able to discern about how this could entangle us. And that may be what, Ukraine wants to do, is to entangle Western Europe and the United States in this conflict more so than we already have been. Someone said, and I read, and there's some speculation that we weren't notified in advance of this attack. And if that were the case, I was speaking to a geopoliticist friend of mine, and he said, well, why should they? And I said, well, there's about 180 billion reasons why they should have. We've given Ukraine a ton of money, and a lot of it was purchased. I'm guessing those drones and a lot of technology was purchased with some U.S. greenbacks. Yeah, you owe the president a phone call before you do something like that, especially when Trump is out there saying, I'm going to sit down with both sides and try and get to a peace agreement.
Well, Trump probably would have said no if he would have been asked, in my view. Although there's a desire to increase pressure, the president in this administration wants to increase pressure on Russia economically and also offer them the carrots of relieving economic sanctions that already exist and stopping the conflict. So, that's what they want to do. Now, you sort of touch on a very important issue here. We work very closely with, the United States works very closely with Ukrainian intelligence, and we collect a lot of information in Ukraine, and we have allies that do the same. So there must have been tremendous OPSEC for that not to have been identified in some way, or if that's a failure on our part too, if we didn't identify it, and if we did but didn't notify the White House, that's another potential failure. So there are some questions that need to be asked by the Senate and House Intelligence Committees.
All right, Colonel, we appreciate your time, and just keep your phone on. You're gonna be on call for. There's a lot more coming up, I guess. It's getting scary. Let's just say it's getting a little trippy out there.
Appreciate it.
Colonel Derek Harvey, thank you so much. All right, folks, before we head to break, just want to remind you about the podcast and YouTube page. They're both updated daily. You can hear this show, absolutely, any of these Dr. Zuhdi Jasser interview earlier, or the Colonel right here just now, Derek Harvey, or anything else. We're talking about the Diddy trial. It's crazy what's going on over there. I can't talk about it here. It's a little bit too salacious. But over there, we can talk about just about everything. Just subscribe. Hit one of those subscribe buttons right there. We'll see you in 2.5 minutes. That's pretty. Lake George, New York. I've never been there. Sounds great, though.
Super nice place.
Oh, you've been there. Oh, that's right. Your family's Ben's family has been in New York.
Northeast New York. It's very, very nice.
Beautiful, beautiful lakes there. By the way, Hunter Biden has tattoos of Finger Lakes on the back of his back, literally on his back. That's not one of those, is it, Ben?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that's way more west.
Got it. Well, it was another banner weekend for legacy media, fabrications, assumptions, cover-ups, all with incredibly dangerous implications. As always, the liars that make up the propaganda brigade of corporate journalism are in their usual form. The lies spread by the mainstream media machine are actually Orwellian at this point. The world is about to end because of climate change. Remember that? BLM looting and fire setting, blowing up businesses. Well, that was mostly peaceful. Hamas and terrorist supporters, well, they're the good guys. But this weekend, at every turn and with every major news story, and there were many, the media showed us yet again who they really are. Loyal Clinton soldier George Stephanopoulos, and by the way, worked for Bill Clinton, who, as we all can recall, attacked the rape survivor Congresswoman Nancy Mace on national television. If you don't remember, watch.
I still get judged for it today.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
And I answered it. You're shaming me for my political choices.
I'm asking you a question about why you endorse someone who's been found liable for rape.
It was not a criminal court. This was a civil court. It was a civil court. And by the way, she joked about the judgment and what she was going to do with all that money, and I find that offensive.
I'm asking you about the man
But as a rape victim who's been shamed for years now because of her rape, you're trying to shame me again by asking me this political question.
You've repeated that again.
I think it's offensive. As a woman, I find it offensive.
So President Trump sued Stephanopoulos for defamation, and he won, by the way. Well, ABC gave Trump $15 million, and George Stephanopoulos was forced to issue an apology. But did George actually learn anything at all? I would say not at all.
The scale is staggering. President Trump and his family are making hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars, as Trump and his administration take official actions that benefit contributors and investors. Just this week, we learned of pardons to tax cheats.
Wait a minute, pardons to tax cheats? When did someone who was president issue a massive pardon to a tax cheat, who, by the way, also had a gun charge? Oh, yeah, that's right, that was Joe Biden. who did it for Hunter Biden. That kind of rings a bell. And you want to talk about pardons? How about preemptive pardons for some of the worst scum buckets in recent history? Fauci, Schiff, the January 6th committee, Mark Milley, Humiliation Milley. Oh, and Joe Biden's entire family of corrupt people. That whole family has been filling their coffers off the Hunter and Joe Biden's treason for years. But sure, let's try to fling some mud at the Trump family. And then lies about Israel once again. If you recall, it was lies peddled unapologetically by the likes of CNN about how tens of thousands of children were going to die in a single day in Gaza. And then 2 Israelis are murdered outside the embassy in Washington, D.C. right after that. Not a coincidence. And then just before a terrorist unleashes on Jews in Colorado on Sunday, yesterday, CNN spreads a story about how Israeli forces opened fire on Gazans trying to get humanitarian aid, which turned out to be completely wrong. But don't worry, CNN changed the headline without retribution, retraction, or apology, because that's their MO. Never mind that they willingly and quickly peddled unchecked lies by Hamas. Video release shows exactly what happened. Hamas opened fire on Gazans trying to get food. So the truth is out. You assume CNN would change their story, right? Well, they did change the headline. They just quietly changed the story, hoping no one would notice their BS. And yet, after the story was debunked and clearly Hamas propaganda peddled by a very willing media, Washington Post comes out with, yet again, Hamas propaganda, and I'm quoting here. At least 31 people were killed Sunday morning in southern Gaza, according to the Strip's health ministry, when Israeli troops opened fire on crowds making their way to collect aid. When Israeli troops opened fire. No retraction by the Washington Post, by the way. So Hamas shot 31 Gazans who were trying to collect humanitarian aid. They blamed it on Israel, and the whole world's media believed it without even questioning it. That's not journalism, folks. That's propaganda. Even though this has happened several times before and told millions of people lies after lies. And the next day, a terrorist sets Jews on fire in Colorado. Coincidence? I think not. And then, after that guy does that, disgraced former FBI jackal Andrew McCabe, remember him, talks about not jumping to conclusions in an obvious act of terror.
That's what the FBI does. We don't step in and take over and draw conclusions 5 minutes after the attack about what happened.
Oh, yeah. Let's wait and see if we can find out another reason. An Egyptian who's overstayed his visa illegally, who lit Jews on fire. Let's see if we can find another narrative for that. Right, McCabe? Apparently, if you're the media, you do jump to conclusions about the terrorists' race.
They do have an individual in custody. We do have a name on that individual and are looking into his background, as are investigators. But he appears to be the man that is seen in some of the videos that were taken by bystanders at the scene, who appears to be a white male with gray hair.
Oh, there you go. White male. There you go. What say you, MSDNC?
There's an individual that's taken into custody. He's a white male. Whether or not that's the person that police ultimately arrested and will ultimately charge in this crime, a bit of a question at this time.
Wait a second. But I thought we don't jump to conclusions about the identity of the shooters or aggressors. Or is that only when they're black, Muslim, or transgender? Well, he's not a white male. And if they wanted 5 more minutes, if they just looked and just waited 5 more minutes, they would know he's an Egyptian who's in this country illegally, thanks to Joe and Kamala. A Muslim illegal immigrant. Say it with us, CNN. What's the matter, MSNBC? Cat got your tongue? And to NBC, the Jews at this parade were Gaza hostage awareness marchers, which at NBC is apparently code for Jews. Interesting choice of words, NBC. CBS, not to be left out of the propaganda brigade, quoting here, attack in Colorado burns several people. Several people. Can you say it? Can you just say it, CBS? These are Jews. They were calling awareness. They were calling awareness the hostage is still being held. Muslim illegal migrant burns Jews in terrorist attack. Why is that so difficult for you to say or write, legacy media? But somehow it is, even for the local police. In a liberal city, no less. No surprise there.
FBI is already calling it a targeted terror attack. Mm-hmm. Would you also refer to it as a terror attack?
So I've been in contact with our local FBI multiple times. We are in contact with them here. We're not calling it a terror attack at this point. Again, it's way too early to speculate motive.
Is it way too early? Is it really way too early? Or did everyone with eyes and ears hear him yelling, "Free Palestine," as he torched the Jews in the area? Yeah, you know what? It's possible we may never fully understand the motive of an illegal immigrant from Egypt setting fire to elderly Jewish people with a homemade flamethrower screaming for an end to Zionism. Of course, no pushback from any of the media at all. He said it's not terrorism, so we believe him and we just move on, right? Well, here's a question. If the media won't even be honest about a firebombing attack on a group of elderly Jews, one of whom was a Holocaust survivor, then what are they actually doing? Why and how are Americans going to have any trust in the media, legacy media? Or was that mostly peaceful for you too, CNN? Listen, the cover-up of Biden's mental and physical downfall, treasonous. The constant lies about President Trump, the constant flagrant and unwarranted comparisons to Hitler and fascism, obvious, desperate, and disgusting. But this, when you lie about these things, there are serious consequences. People are dying because of the propaganda and the lies in the media. This is no longer about lying for a drooling, fumbling president. The media is now complicit in the deaths of innocent Americans. They will never, ever come back from this. And I know we will. They must be held accountable. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. Something interesting has happened. And by interesting, I mean it's kind of gross, disgusting, completely inappropriate. But the opportunity to witness the fallout of Cory Booker's behavior, always good TV, I would say. In case you missed it, Senator Cory Booker made a very familiar gesture over the weekend, one that closely resembles that Nazi salute that they were wrecking Elon Musk about. Remember this? Well, he did the same thing. Look at what he's doing right there. That salute, something that the biased corporate media would never miss a chance to comment on, right? So we've got video of Cory doing it. We've seen Nancy Pelosi do it. We saw AOC do it. We saw Bernie Sanders do it. We saw everyone. It's this. It's my heart to you. But when Elon Musk did it, after he was buddies with Trump, first bro, first bud, well, he was horrible. He's a Nazi. But God forbid the left does it. Oh, it means heart going out to you. Joe Biden gave some comments over the weekend to CNN about his recent cancer diagnosis. Well, this man is a mess.
And there's also been a lot of discussion recently about your mental and physical capabilities while you were in office.
You can see that. I'm mentally incompetent and I can't walk and I can beat the hell out of both of them.
Well, do you want to reply to any of those reports and also to the fact that there are some Democrats who are now questioning whether you should have run for re-election in the first place?
Why didn't they run against me then? Because I'd have beaten them.
Do you have any regrets?
What are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? Why are they putting him out there like this? He's stumbling, mumbling. He's gone. He was gone for the last 2.5 years. What are you doing? There's no rehab of that guy. Look what else he said. Watch.
This day is the 10th anniversary of the loss of my son, Bo, spent a year in Iraq. And to be honest, it's a hard day. His son and I, Hunter, who's here in the crowd, I don't know where you're sitting, Hunter, but all the way in the back there. His daddy came to this event with me about the same age when he started. He just graduated from high school, heading off to college.
You know, listen, first of all, it's Hunter, he said his son, his daddy, Joe Biden actually thinks Bo Biden was Hunter's father, their father and son. They were brothers. They're both Joe's sons. The man's completely lost it. And then how about the clap for Hunter in the back? Who's going to clap for? Guys, it's time. I have no compassion for this man. I am sorry. He's older. It's sad to see someone older lose it like that. This man is a racist. He's been a horrible politician for 60 years. He's lived off the taxpayer dime for 60 years. He's not a good man. He's not a favor. He's not a use to anyone anymore. Put him in retirement. Jill Biden, you should be thrown out of the country for elder abuse. That is just awful what you're doing to that man. Jasmine Crockett, remember her? She's really good at dumping gasoline all over Democrats' fires. Here she is running her mouth about Joe Biden and making her entire party look worse.
Now, obviously, it's not like I've known Joe Biden my whole life, because I haven't. But I can tell you that I literally have had conversations with him, not once, not twice, probably not even 3 times, multiple times. And I never, ever, ever felt like I saw anything that was decline. Now, would I be honest if I said that we don't all decline at some point? Like, there has to be a point, just because we're aging, that there is like a level of kind of fall off that we all have. I think that that's the natural part of aging. It's the same thing that happens with our bodies, right? Like, this is a whole body thing. Like, you probably not running 10 miles anymore like you used to, right? So there is a natural, but does that mean that you're not qualified? Or does it mean that it is so detrimental that it's causing harm? Absolutely not.
What the hell is that word salad? Well, Jazzy Jazz followed up that word salad about Joe Biden with some comments for Trump. She thinks, I don't know, she and the Dems should use the 25th Amendment to kick Trump out of the White House. Listen.
If they want to talk about medical issues, we also could have a conversation about Trump, because I don't know what's going on. But we also know that, like, he is like next level unhinged, and he's been unhinged since the campaign. Like, the fact that people ignore the fact that he was constantly talking about the whales or the sharks, and he was talking about, I mean, the windmills. I don't know. I mean, just all over the place. And recently at West Point decided to talk about trophy wives, and decided to talk about his investigations. And then right after the crypto event, he couldn't read the words on the teleprompter. Like, he did not know the words. He couldn't read it. I don't know what's going on. But, like, if we want to talk about something, we need to talk about whether or not he really has the cognitive ability, because he is the current sitting president, and whether or not the 25th Amendment should apply is something that maybe we should be digging into.
This little back and forth here between those two, where she said nothing was wrong with Joe Biden, she never saw it, and then she's got a problem with the way Trump read a teleprompter and a crypto. It's exactly why politics and politicians are just disgusting. They're just disgusting human beings. The filthy lies that roll off their tongue like water. It's unbelievable, right? I mean, you have 2 eyes and 2 ears. You have to witness Joe Biden. You know he was losing it. Trump is playing golf after coming back from days of no sleep in the Middle East. Politicians, they're just scum. That's the worst. All right, folks. I want to remind you about my podcast and YouTube page, updated daily. You can see any of the show, of course, or the whole show, but we also put a bunch of stuff up there that we don't do here, and we're covering that Diddy trial. Is unbelievable, salacious. You got to see the names. Barack Obama was mentioned today, Leonardo DiCaprio, Mick Jagger. Got to go there, subscribe, tell you all about it. We'll be back, Bannon, the backside of 2.5 minute break. That's beautiful. Dallas is Dallas is a great city. Houston, prefer Houston to Dallas, but Dallas is a pretty cool city. You know what? Let's bring Steve right in, because we got to get into, there's so much going on, so much geopolitics, and man, there's no one better to talk to about that stuff than Steve. So Steve, this drone strike, it looks like $1 million worth of drones. Don't know where they were purchased, not sure whose equipment it is. I'm guessing a lot of American money was behind that, but bombs takes out $7 billion worth of Russian assets. What are your thoughts on this one? And especially, let's talk a little bit about...
Well, first off, we can talk about Russian assets.
Yeah, go ahead.
Eric, this is the third leg of the triad. You know, that you got the intercontinental ballistic missiles, you have the nuclear-powered boomers, and you've got the strategic aircraft. What the Ukrainians did, Curtis LeMay never dreamed of. They basically took out, a third of the Russian strategic bombing command. Right? If you believe on the face of it, even the Russians haven't totally denied it. They said it's not as many as 41 aircraft. Look, this is audacious. It's bold. It shows a lot of courage and valor and bravery and smarts of the Ukrainians. A couple things. Number one, impossible. You remember the New York Times piece last year in 24 where they talked about Wiesbaden, Germany, where the American intelligence community and the German intelligence community, two of the best in the world, are essentially running the Ukraine war. There's no chance the Ukrainians did this without severe American involvement. And the White House is saying we didn't know anything about it.
But we talked about this. Remember, we talked about this last week. There's a difference between severe American involvement, CIA, whatever, secret ops, special ops, and the White House being officially notified. I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, but there can be we're not going to tell you about this, but Just heads up.
Well, if it's plausible deniability, here's my problem with that. If I'm Bibi Netanyahu, and remember on the show on War Room, we've been banging on Bibi doesn't really have an alternative to go it alone because the Americans will get dragged in, just like we're going to get dragged into a war. This is going up the escalatory ladder rapidly. This is a 3,000-mile inside Russian strike on key strategic nuclear assets. We've never even considered something like this. This hasn't happened. They were our ally in World War II, but even in the Cold War, there was never anything about a preemptive strike on their strategic aircraft. It might have been some advanced planning and up there in the in the ether, but nothing ever smart. LeMay and these guys would never do it. The Ukrainians just did it and dragged us into the middle of it.
No, in part of
there's no good options.
The part of I understand again. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. Part of the deal we have with Russia's nuclear non-proliferation agreement is you have to keep that where we can see it. We have to be able to see that stuff. Don't be building that stuff and hiding it in underground shelters and whatnot. So they expose themselves, make themselves vulnerable. Ukraine takes advantage of it and allegedly doesn't alert President Trump. I would say, best case, we will never allow Ukraine into NATO. Better case, we remove ourselves from NATO. Your thoughts?
I tend to agree because they're going to try to trip a Article 5 here. Here's, I think, Eric, I agree with you that this ought to be under real consideration right now. I think as a starter, this raid ought to be condemned by the White House. All aid ought to be pulled. And Lindsey Graham's, either passport, I said they should arrest him today. Ben Harnow had a better one. Take his passport away so he can't get back in the country. He's over there stirring it up all weekend. He's given interviews saying, hey, the White House is one, Trump says Ukraine has no cards. He says, well, I think they got a lot of cards. Clearly he had been briefed on this.
Pull up.
Okay. He says, I think they got a lot of cards. And the House and the Senate, are going to pass this. They're going to pass their own restrictions, sanctions on Russia. He's running his own war policy. They're trying to drag us into the Third World War. Because the deep state wants it, the defense industry wants it, all the warmongers in Washington, D.C. want it, and we're inexorably getting drawn into this thing. We just had a country that we're their biggest sponsor, whether you like it or not, we're their biggest sponsor, just hit the strategic nuclear forces, air forces of Russia deep inside of Russian territory with a very sophisticated drone strike based upon American artificial intelligence, target acquisition, fire control solutions, all of it.
So the war room becomes the lead story on pull it up, guys. You pull that full screen again. There it is on the Telegraph. Steve Bannon warns Ukraine risks escalating war after drone strike. So, what is? Are we at the precipice of World War III, Steve?
Well, as we've said, Eric, as you know, we believe we're in the kinetic part, the early stages of the kinetic part, like 1939 to 1941, that time between the invasion of Poland and really the invasion of Russia, where World War II really kicked off. President Trump has said in the Middle East and everywhere, we got to lay our guns down. We're going to get ceasefires. We're going to talk about temporary setting down. I'm going to let deals and prosperity coming from the Middle East. The deal, as Eric, we didn't love, the rare earth deal in Ukraine. We're going to cut deals, make people prosperous, and there won't be any reason to fight. Here, we're going in the exact opposite direction. They're essentially mocking President Trump's lay down your guns and let's talk peace with ceasefires. This is a massive escalation. They attacked deep inside of Russian territory, Russian strategic forces, and wiped them out. They wiped out, if you believe the Ukrainians, a third of Russian strategic, part of their triad, part of their nuclear triad. If that had happened in the United States, if somebody had done that to us, that's the biggest act of war. We would have left them as a burning cinder.
I'm worried about the response. I am very worried about what Putin's going to do. I don't care what he says he's going to do. In fact, at one point he said, we'll investigate, we'll find out what happened, we'll take care of Ukraine and beyond, meaning anyone else's fingerprints on it. As you point out, the United States fingerprints are all at friggin' Lindsey Graham is in country, right, or was or is in country, in Kiev right now, or when the attack took place. Good God, we are so implicated, Steve. It's your show, but I hate to do this. We'll bring it up again if you want.
Eric, hang on. Eric, you nailed the buried lead, and beyond. Okay, they're not leaving it at Ukraine and beyond. So it's, folks, if you're MAGA, you support President Trump. President Trump has tried to stop the kinetic part of the Third World War. And I got to tell you, ever since they went to this, as you and I have talked, Eric, ever since she went to Moscow for the 80th commemoration of Victory in Europe Day, the Russians have escalated in Ukraine, no doubt about that. The Russian rapprochement doesn't look like it's going anywhere soon. Tonight, we're going to start in Korea on the 6 o'clock show. Looks like Korea is going to fall tomorrow at the battle box, political warfare, a political party totally controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The Persians told us today, thanks but no thanks on your nuclear deal. So, folks, get out the rosaries and say a few prayers. But also, we got to take some action here to back President Trump and make sure that we tone all this stuff down. Eric Bolling, your thoughts, Eric, before we punch out?
My thoughts are I'm going to stick with you, Steve. I'm going to stick to War Room because you're on top of all. Appreciate your time, man. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Love you, brother.
You too.
Okay, see you again.